Welcome to Truth on Wheels. I'm Don Blackwell, the Executive Director of the Gospel Broadcasting Network. Are all sins the same in the eyes of God? I remember a few years ago hearing someone use this argument with regard to the discussion of homosexuality. He was saying, I don't know why people are getting so upset about homosexual marriage because he said all sins are the same in the eyes of God. And so he said there's no difference between two unmarried people sleeping together in a heterosexual relationship as compared to a homosexual marriage. He said they're both fornication. Now, he's right about both of them being fornication, and he's right about both of them being sinful relationships, but he's not right about all sins being the same in the eyes of God. I guess the reason people say this and the reason people think this is because any sin can cause a man to be lost eternally. And in that sense, all sins are the same. Any sin can cause you to be lost. Violating the law of God puts you in a lost condition. It doesn't matter whether it's a big sin or a little sin. That part's true. But it is not accurate to say that all sins are equal and viewed the same in the eyes of God. First, I want to show you that Jesus says just the opposite of this. In John chapter 19 and verse 11, Jesus is standing in the presence of Pilate, and he says to him, You could have no power at all against me unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, the one who has delivered me to you, he has the greater sin. I want you to notice particularly that Jesus refers to one sin as being greater than another sin. Now, we could stop right there, and that settles the matter because Jesus says not all sins are the same, some are greater than others. But let's notice a second passage. In Second Timothy chapter 3 and verse 13, the Bible says, But evil men and impostors will grow worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. Now, if all sins are completely equal, how could a person grow worse? Seems like he would just remain the same. There would just be a level, and you couldn't get beyond that level. Here's a third passage Psalm 19. In the King James Version of the Bible, it compares what is called secret sins to presumptuous sins. Now, a secret sin is a sin of ignorance. That is, it's secret to you. You don't realize it's a sin. A presumptuous sin is sin of which you had full knowledge. You knew that it was wrong and you chose to do it anyway. After talking about these two different types, in Psalm 19, verse 13, he refers to the presumptuous sin as the great transgression. Now, what's the point of that? The point is, if you've got full knowledge and you do it anyway, it's worse. They're both sins, but this one is worse. And we get that. If you've got a child and your child does something that's wrong, you might say to him, Son, that was wrong. And he says, Well, I didn't know it. Okay, son, that's wrong. Don't do it again. If he does it again and you fuss at him and he says, I'll do what I want to do, and he shakes his fist in your face, do you view those two things the same? You see, they're different. We understand the difference in this. Proverbs 6 and verse 16 says, These six things doth the Lord hate. Yea, seven are an abomination to him. Now, if all sins are viewed equally in the eyes of God, then what is the point of this passage? He is saying here that here is a list of sins that are particularly offensive to God. In Exodus chapter 32 and verse 30, when Moses came down from the mountain, he was up receiving the Ten Commandments. When he came down from the mountain, he found Israel worshiping the golden calf. And he said that they had committed a great sin. In fact, in Exodus 32 and verse 21, he says to Aaron, How have you brought so great a sin upon the people? That is to say, Aaron, you've got the people worshiping a golden idol. He said, This is a high level sin. This is very, very serious. Not all sins are the same in the eyes of God. In 1 Samuel chapter 2, 22 through 24, The Bible discusses the fact that some sins are against man, some sins are against God. It's two different types of sin. One is more serious than the other. First John chapter 5 and verse 16 talks about the fact that there is a sin unto death. There is a sin not unto death. Now, it's not our objective right now to talk about what that means or what they are, but simply to observe that not all sins are the same. Second Peter chapter 2 and verse 20 talks about a person who comes out of the world and he becomes a Christian and then he returns to the world. The Bible says the latter end is worse with him than the beginning was. He said it would have been better for him not to have known the way of righteousness. What's the point? Why would God punish one sin more severely than another if it's all the same? First Timothy chapter 5 and verse 8 says, "But if any provide not for his own, and especially those of his own house, he has denied the faith, and he is worse than an infidel." Not the same, he's worse than an infidel. See, there are different levels here. Friends, we could go on and on. The Bible is filled with passages that teach that not all sins are the same in the eyes of God. Some are greater, some have greater consequences. Who would believe that God would look down from heaven and see a man abusing an innocent child and see another man running a red light and say, those are the same? Are those the same to you? Friends, they're not the same to me, and they're not the same to God. We need to stop saying. Now, what about the argument that the person made that I alluded to at the beginning, that homosexuality and heterosexual fornication are the same in the eyes of God? Is that true? I don't believe that the Bible teaches that either. I want you to listen as I read Romans chapter 1 and verse 26. Let's read it, and then we'll make some observations from it. For this reason, God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise, also the men, leaving the natural use of the woman, burned in their lust for one another, men with men, committing what is shameful, and receiving in themselves the penalty of their error, which was due. All right, let's pick out some key phrases from this passage. First, I want you to notice the word vile. God gave them up to vile affections. Homosexuality is described in the King James and the New King James as vile. The word vile in English means morally base or evil, wicked, depraved, sinful, offensive to the senses or sensibilities, repulsive, disgusting, cheap, worthless, degrading, lowly, of poor quality, very inferior. That's Webster's. Now, this phrase, vile affections, in the King James comes from a Greek phrase which means passions of dishonor. The Greek word here that's translated as vile is defined by the Greek lexicon as a state of dishonor, a disaster in Greco Roman society. Now, a second description that God gives to homosexuality is unseemly. In the second half of Romans 1:27, he says, men committing that which is shameful is what the New King James says. The Old King James says unseemly. What does that mean? Hirschbacher's Greek lexicon says indecency, infamous lust, or lewdness. Now, pertinent to our present discussion is this next phrase, unnatural. Friends, if you consider the anatomy of a man and the anatomy of a woman, there's a natural complement there. God made us that way. But then, if you think about a man having relations with another man, it's not the same as a man committing fornication with a woman. The Bible says that's vile. It's passions that are dishonorable. It's unnatural. Jude in verse 7 describes homosexuality. The King James says pursuing strange flesh. The word strange in the King James often means foreign and unauthorized. And I would add this: homosexuality is also worse in its effects. Friends, it is not accurate to say that all sins are the same in the eyes of God. Now, again, any sin can cause a man to be lost. The Bible absolutely does teach that. But not all sins are the same. God views them differently, and many sins have different consequences. Thank you for this great question, and thank you for joining us for this episode of Truth on Wheels. If we can help you in any way, please reach out to us at the Gospel Broadcasting Network. And in the meantime, download our app. It's filled with great resources. We've got free commentaries, free videos, a number of free books, many things that can help you in your Christian walk and that can help you learn the truth. Thank you for joining us today for Truth on Wheels.